Welcome, dear listener, to Whispers of the Night, to a quiet corner of Willow Street, where the sun spills softly across cobblestones, and the air carries a hint of lavender and old linen. Tonight, we wander into a little tailor shop, tucked between time-worn walls, where every stitch holds a story, and every thread carries a feeling. Here lives Liora Wren, a quiet seamstress with gentle hands and a heart that listens. She mends not only fabric, but the invisible threads of emotion, sorrow, love, longing, all woven delicately into garments that hold the weight of human hearts. Settle into your favorite pillow, wrap yourself in warmth, and let your mind drift slowly into a world where magic flows through threads and emotions dance softly, waiting to be felt. This is the story of the tailor who sewed emotions. In her little shop, Liora Wren moves quietly among piles of fabrics, each one whispering the memories of those who brought them. A scarf carries the sorrow of a long-forgotten goodbye. A coat hums with the joy of a mother's first laugh in years. And each day she stitches these feelings carefully, allowing the emotions to flow through her fingertips, through the threads, into something tangible, something alive. Sometimes the threads are stubborn, twisting under her hands, echoing the lives they have touched. Sometimes they shimmer, pulsing with warmth, like sunlight reflected in a gentle stream. And though the work fills her shop with color, warmth, and magic, it leaves her a little more fragile each day. There was a lonely child who came to her, clutching a piece of fabric and a hope that seemed bigger than his small shoulders. He asked her to make a coat for his sick mother so that she might smile again. Liora poured all her care, all her warmth into the garment. Every stitch carried a whisper of laughter, a pulse of love, a tiny echo of joy. When the mother wore the coat, her laughter returned like the sun breaking through clouds after a long storm. The child's eyes sparkled, and for a moment, the world was filled with a gentle, golden light. Yet, Liora felt a piece of herself slip away with each thread of joy she had sewn. Her hands trembled, her chest lightened, and she realized the depth of what it truly meant to carry the hearts of others. In time, the threads began to twist and tug on their own, memories spilling into the shop, emotions unbound. Fabrics hummed softly, walls seemed to hold whispers, and Liora knew she could not continue without giving herself a gift. So she wove one final creation, a cloak for herself, a tapestry of every color and feeling she had ever touched. Love, grief, longing, laughter all returned gently through the stitches, reminding her of who she was, of the whole heart she had once carried. And when the dawn came, she wrapped the cloak around her shoulders, feeling the warmth of every life she had touched, every heart she had mended. Though she disappeared from the little shop that morning, her magic remained. Threads shimmered faintly in soft, golden light, and her legacy whispered quietly through the fabrics, waiting for another heart brave enough to feel them fully. The Tailor Who Sewed Emotions, Threads of the Heart. The shop still smelled faintly of lavender and dust, the kind of scent that never leaves a place, even long after its keeper has gone. On the corner of Willow Street, where the cobblestones turned uneven and the air always felt a little slower, stood Wren and Stitch, a tailor's shop that had not changed for 50 years. The painted sign above the window was cracked, the glass clouded by time. And yet, when Liora unlocked the door that morning, a golden hush seemed to greet her like an old friend. It had been 3 months since her grandmother's passing. The will had named her as the inheritor of everything: the house, the shop, the tools, the silence. Liora had returned to the town she'd left behind years ago, her fingers unsure of the needle, her heart unsure of what she still believed she could mend. The floorboards creaked under her shoes as she walked through the dim front room, tracing her hand across the counter that once held folded shirts and dresses, all stitched with care. Dust floated like tiny ghosts in the slanted light. She whispered, "I'm home," though it didn't yet feel true. On the table lay the old wooden box she hadn't dared open until that morning. It was small, about the size of a bread loaf, carved with a faded pattern of vines and tiny birds. The brass latch was cold, the wood smooth from years of touch. Etched into its lid were 4 delicate words, 4 stitches that feel. She thought it must have been one of her grandmother's playful inscriptions, the kind of thing she used to say when mending clothes for heartbroken neighbors. Every stitch holds a story her grandmother had told her once. Liora smiled faintly at the memory and lifted the lid. Inside were spools of thread, 7 of them, each one shimmering faintly in the half-light. They weren't ordinary threads. One glowed a deep blue like twilight, another shimmered gold, as if spun from candlelight. The silver one looked almost alive, catching light where there was none. Liora ran her thumb along the silk. It felt warm, impossibly soft. For a long moment, she simply watched them, listening to the ticking of the wall clock and the faint hum in the air, like a sound she couldn't quite hear but could somehow feel. When she finally stepped into the back room, she saw the old sewing machine waiting by the window, draped with a linen cloth. The light outside was thin, barely making its way through the lace curtains, and the world beyond seemed painted in gray. She remembered being small, sitting on that same stool as her grandmother worked, her wrinkled hands moving with patient rhythm, the silver thimble glinting each time she turned the fabric. The trick, she used to say, is not to mend what's torn, but to listen to what it wants to become. Liora had forgotten that until now. The bell above the door chimed softly. She startled. No one was supposed to come in yet. When she peeked into the front room, an elderly man stood by the counter, Mr. Hemsley, her grandmother's oldest customer. He had been the town's clockmaker once, his hands as steady as his voice. He smiled when he saw her. "I heard the shops open again," he said. "Didn't think I'd see that day." Liora returned the smile, just trying to keep it breathing. He placed something on the counter, a scarf, frayed and torn in the middle. The color had faded to a weary gray. "It belonged to my wife," he said quietly. "Can you fix it?" "I know it's only cloth," but he didn't finish. The pause carried what words couldn't. Liora nodded. "I'll do my best." After he left, she carried the scarf into the workroom. The fabric was soft, delicate, a lifetime's companion. She threaded her needle with ordinary cotton first, but it snagged on the tear and broke. Frustrated, she reached for another, her grandmother's shimmering silver spool. It almost pulsed beneath her fingertips, and though she hesitated, curiosity won. She threaded the needle, pressed her foot on the pedal, and began to sew. The moment the needle touched the fabric, the air shifted. A soft hum, low, harmonic, rose from the table, and the thread glowed faintly as it passed through the cloth. Liora froze. The stitch shimmered, not with reflected light, but with something that seemed to come from within. She finished the seam, her breath trembling, and set the scarf aside. By the time she reached the window, her heart was pounding. The town outside looked unchanged, quiet streets, sleepy roofs, yet everything seemed slightly sharper, more alive. Even the dust motes seemed to dance slower. She told herself she was imagining things, that grief had simply made her fanciful. But when the doorbell chimed again that evening, Mr. Hemsley returned, his scarf neatly folded in her hands. I did what I could, Liora said softly. He took it, fingers brushing the repaired seam. For a long time, he said nothing. Then, quietly, he murmured, "It smells like her perfume again." Liora looked up, startled. "What?" He smiled through tears that gathered suddenly in his eyes. "Lavender and rain. Haven't smelled that in years." She didn't know what to say. The air between them shimmered faintly, as if holding something too delicate to touch. When he left, she watched from the doorway as he walked slowly down Willow Street, the scarf trailing behind him in the evening light, and for a moment, she swore she saw it glow. That night, Liora sat by the window long after the lamps had gone out. The silver spool rested in her palm, still faintly warm. She tried to convince herself it was a trick of the light. Perhaps the thread contained some reflective material, or maybe she was just tired. But deep inside, beneath all reasons, a tiny spark of belief began to flicker. She opened her grandmother's old notebook, its pages filled with hand-drawn patterns and neat cursive notes. Between the pages, she found something she hadn't noticed before, a folded scrap of parchment. On it, in her grandmother's writing, were words that seemed to pulse with quiet meaning. For every feeling unspoken, there is a stitch that remembers. Liora ran her thumb over the ink. It was slightly raised, as though written with something heavier than pen, almost like it had been pressed into the page. She whispered the words aloud, testing their weight. The silence that followed felt almost like a response. Days passed, and she continued repairing garments for the few townsfolk who still remembered the shop. A child's torn coat, a seamstress's apron, a soldier's old uniform. Each time she used the shimmering thread, she felt something stir: laughter, sorrow, warmth, subtle waves that seemed to echo the emotion in the fabric's history. The clothes carried memory, and her stitches seemed to wake it. And yet, she also noticed something else. Each time she used the thread, her chest grew heavier, as though a small piece of her heart was being sewn into the cloth. The mirror began to show shadows under her eyes, her reflection softer at the edges. But there was beauty in it too, a strange peace in watching others leave the shop lighter, smiling with a quietness that words could never give. One evening, after closing, she sat at her sewing table, surrounded by candlelight. The shop was silent except for the rhythmic ticking of the clock. Her fingers moved on instinct, tracing a pattern she didn't remember starting, a small heart stitched into a scrap of linen. The thread glowed a soft gold this time, though she hadn't changed it. The sight filled her with both wonder and unease. She thought of her grandmother again, the way she used to hum as she worked, the kindness that seemed to flow from her hands into every stitch. Perhaps this was her legacy, Liora thought, a gift or a test. Outside, the rain began to fall, gentle against the windows. Liora leaned back, letting the rhythm of the droplets blend with the hum of the sewing machine still cooling from use. The golden thread shimmered faintly in the candlelight, like something alive, something breathing. And for the first time in years, she whispered into the quiet, "Thank you, grandmother." The words drifted through the room like a sigh, and from somewhere unseen, the faint scent of lavender filled the air again. The fabric of feelings. Word spread quietly through the small town, moving like a gentle current from whispered conversation to curious glances in shop windows, until it became impossible to ignore. People began to arrive at Liora Wren's little shop on Willow Street, carrying garments that had long been abandoned in drawers, closets, or attics, tidums imbued with stories, memories, and feelings they could no longer bear to carry alone. A faded scarf smelled faintly of lavender and old rain, its edges frayed with countless washes, and yet it held a heavy weight in the hands of the woman who had brought it. A child pressed a small coat to his chest, the buttons worn smooth, his eyes shimmering with the tears of a loss he could not put into words. Liora received each piece with quiet attentiveness, the air of her workshop growing thick with anticipation and the faint scent of wool, cotton, and lavender. It began with small, simple stitches. She ran her needle along the seams, feeling the pull of invisible threads beneath her fingers. Each garment seemed to whisper to her, tremble slightly, as though relieved to be noticed. Slowly, the threads she threaded through the cloth began to hum with the emotions they carried. The first time it happened, she paused mid-stitch, her hands hovering over the fabric. A warmth had risen from the scarf she was mending, a soft golden light shimmering where her fingers brushed against it. She realized, with a sudden, breathless clarity, that she could feel what the cloth contained, the longing of the woman who had worn it for years, the memories she had tried to hide from the world, the quiet ache of desire that had never been fulfilled. The scarf shivered in her hands, as if in acknowledgement. From that day on, Liora began to notice patterns, subtle hints in the vibrations of the fabric she touched. Blue was longing, the kind of ache that lingered when someone or something had been lost. Gold was love, radiant and unyielding, pulsing like sunlight trapped in silk. Silver was memory, soft and elusive, like moonlight spilling over the surface of a quiet pond. Each garment seemed to contain a spectrum of these colors, blending together in unique harmonies, sometimes muted, sometimes fierce and vivid. She found herself adjusting the tension of her thread and the rhythm of her hands according to what the cloth required, almost as though she were listening to the heartbeat of someone else's soul. people began to leave, their garments with her for days or weeks. She would sit at her wooden table under the warm glow of the lamplight, the sewing machine humming gently like a quiet companion, the pile of fabrics growing higher and heavier with the weight of unspoken emotions. A shawl carried the grief of a mother who had lost her son years ago. Liora held it to her chest, feeling the twisting sorrow seep into her own bones. A delicate blouse shimmered faintly with the joy of a young woman finally embracing the love she had once thought forbidden. Liora's fingers danced across the fine threads, coaxing the golden light to shine without breaking. She realized she could not simply mend these fabrics. She had to understand them, to feel them fully, to give them space within herself before they could be returned to their owners. But the work was not without cost. She began to notice the toll it took on her body and spirit. After long hours of stitching, her hands would tremble, and a fatigue unlike ordinary tiredness would settle into her chest. She found herself staring at her reflection in the dusty glass of the shop window and seeing faint traces of colors lingering around her, a pale blue shimmer of longing, a faint gold glow of love, a silver haze of memory. It was as though the emotions she absorbed from the fabrics left invisible marks upon her, imprinting themselves on her being. There were nights when she would lie awake in her small apartment above the shop, her hands itching to reach for the fabrics she had yet to mend, yet feeling drained, hollowed by the invisible threads she had stitched into herself. She had always known her work carried a quiet magic, but she had not expected it to entwine so deeply with her own soul. Despite this, she could not stop. Each day brought someone new, a new set of colors, a new story demanding to be acknowledged. One morning, a man came with a coat that smelled faintly of tobacco and rain, its collar worn and softened by decades of use. He hesitated at the door, unsure if anyone could truly understand what he carried. Liora smiled gently, her presence calm and unjudging, and gestured toward her table. As she ran her hands over the coat, she felt a heaviness unlike any before, a deep, almost suffocating sorrow intertwined with faint, flickering sparks of hope. She stitched carefully, listening to the quiet symphony of his memories and grief, letting the threads carry the tension out of the fabric and back into the world in a softened, lighter form. When the man returned a week later, the coat seemed to hug him back, the blue of his longing now tempered with silver and gold, leaving him more able to breathe freely than he had in years. It was not always easy to separate her own emotions from those she absorbed. Some days, the colors she felt were too vivid, too intense, pressing against her chest with weight she could barely bear. She remembered a scarf brought in by a young girl who had recently lost her father. The grief poured out in heavy waves of indigo and soft gray, and Liora found herself weeping as she worked, the tears mingling with the threads. She wondered, not for the first time, whether this was sustainable. Could she continue to hold the emotions of strangers, weaving them into something beautiful, while simultaneously letting them sink into her own heart? The question haunted her, but the gentle tug of duty on, perhaps something deeper, a sense of connection pulled her hands back to the fabrics each morning. As the weeks passed, Liora noticed another subtle change. The fabrics began to respond not only to her hands, but to her intentions, her own thoughts and feelings. When she approached a garment with empathy and care, the threads seemed to relax, glimmering softly in acknowledgement. When she hesitated or felt fear, the colors flickered, uncertain, as though wary of being absorbed into something fragile. She realized that the act of mending and understanding was a dialogue, a delicate negotiation between the emotions of the cloth and the emotions of the one who touched it. It was not enough to simply be present. She had to be fully herself, conscious of the balance between her own heart and the hearts of others. In this way, Liora began to learn something extraordinary. Every stitch was a conversation, every garment a story waiting to be told. There were moments when she felt the laughter of a bride preserved in the folds of her wedding dress, or the quiet satisfaction of a man who had finally forgiven himself, reflected in the lining of an old vest. She became attuned to the subtleties of each color, each vibration, each hidden intention woven into the fibers. She could sense hesitation in a hem, fear in a seam, joy in a fold. It was exhausting, yes, and sometimes lonely. But it was also exhilarating, this secret world of human emotion that existed in plain sight, waiting only for her to notice. Yet, as her skill grew, so did the risk. The first time she misjudged a stitch, attempting to draw out sorrow too quickly. She felt a wave of exhaustion unlike any before. Her body ached, her chest constricted, and for a moment she thought she might faint. The colors left behind traces on her skin, like faint bruises of emotion that pulsed with each heartbeat. She realized then that her giftor, her curse was not without boundaries. She could weave the feelings of others, but each time she did, she gave a piece of herself in return. The energy she absorbed was not something she could discard. It became part of her, a hidden reservoir of other lives bleeding into her own. Despite the danger, she continued because she could not turn away. The town had come to rely on her in ways they did not fully understand. The baker, who carried years of regret in a threadbare apron, smiled again after receiving a repaired cloak. The seamstress next door finally released her unspoken longing for a lost love after. Liora patched the frayed edges of an old shawl. People did not speak of it openly. They only nodded in quiet thanks, or left small tokens of appreciation at the shop. But Liora felt it in the ripple of energy that passed through the town, subtle but undeniable, as if the act of repairing these garments was also repairing something in the community itself. And yet, as the days grew longer and the pile of fabrics higher, the drain on her spirit became impossible to ignore. She found herself retreating into quiet moments, sitting cross-legged on the soft rug of her shop, surrounded by scattered spools of thread, fabric scraps, thimbles, and pins. She would close her eyes, feeling the remnants of emotions settled around her like dust motes in the sunlight. She began to meditate on the colors, letting them swirl and intertwine in her mind's eye, drawing them inward and then releasing them, a silent practice of balance and preservation. It was a delicate ritual, one that kept her grounded and yet reminded her of the immense weight she carried. As night fell, the shop transformed into a quiet sanctuary. The lamplight cast warm golden pools on the wooden floorboards, illuminating piles of carefully folded cloth that seemed to pulse faintly with the remnants of the day's work. Outside, the town grew hushed, the only sound, the occasional clatter of a cartwheel on cobblestone or the distant bark of a dog. Liora would stretch her tired arms above her head, then rest her head on the soft cushions she had placed near the shelves. The fabrics around her seemed to whisper in tiny, satisfied murmurs, and for a brief moment, she allowed herself to feel the comfort they offered. Her eyelids grew heavy, and she drifted into sleep, surrounded by the very emotions she had stitched into the world. A gentle glow of blue, gold, and silver lingering faintly in the corners of her vision, weaving into her dreams. In her dreams, she wandered through corridors made of fabric, each wall and floor and ceiling pulsing with the lives of others. She saw flashes of longing and joy, sorrow and regret, intertwining like rivers of color flowing through her hands. She understood, in a quiet, wordless way, that this was her gift, to be the bridge between the hidden hearts of the world and the world itself, to translate invisible stories into something tangible, something that could heal. And yet she also understood the peril, the risk of losing herself entirely if she allowed the colors to take more than she could bear. But for now, sleep was a reprieve, a gentle moment where the emotions around her softened and she could simply exist, cradled by the quiet magic of her own making. When morning came, she would awaken to the muted light of dawn filtering through the dusty windows, her fingers tingling with residual threads of the night's dreamscape. The fabrics would still be there, waiting for her attention, humming softly with anticipation. She would rise, stretch, and begin again, guided by the invisible language of color and feeling, aware now more than ever that each stitch she made was both a gift and a sacrifice. And though the path was difficult, exhausting, and sometimes frightening, she felt an undeniable pull toward it. She was a weaver of hidden hearts, a silent witness to the lives of others, and she could not turn away from what the fabrics asked of her. Every garment she touched, every emotion she drew out and returned, became part of a growing tapestry of understanding and connection, a tapestry woven not just from cloth, but from the very threads of the human soul. And as Liora Wren continued her work, she felt the quiet, bittersweet truth settle into her being, that to carry the feelings of the world was both her burden and her privilege, and that through the soft glow of thread and stitch, she could make the invisible beauty of the heart visible to all. The coat of joy. The morning sunlight filtered softly through the tall windows of Liora's shop, casting long golden streaks across the wooden floorboards. Dust motes danced lazily in the beams, drifting like tiny stars suspended in warm air. It was quiet, a lull in the usual hum of sewing machines, the occasional tap of scissors, or the soft shuffle of fabric being examined and folded. Yet that morning, the quiet was broken by the light patter of small footsteps on the worn floor outside, hesitant yet purposeful, as though the child who made them had been practicing courage with each careful step. Liora looked up from the table, where she had been sorting spools of thread by color, her hands still faintly tingling from yesterday's work. A boy stood in the doorway, no more than 8 or 9, his hair tousled as if he had just run through the cobbled streets, his eyes wide and shining with a mixture of hope and worry. He clutched a small piece of fabric to his chest. its edges fraying and stained with time, a threadbare remnant of something once treasured. "Excuse me," he said softly, his voice barely above a whisper. Can you make something for my mother?" His gaze dropped to the floor, then back to her with a sudden flicker of determination. She's sick. She hasn't smiled in a long time. Could you make her a coat so she can smile again?" Leora's heart tightened. She had grown accustomed to the emotions woven into every garment that came through her door. But there was something uniquely fragile in the way this child carried his hope. It was not just sorrow or longing or regret. There was love, fierce and unspoken, raw and unpolished, radiating from him in waves she could almost feel across the space between them. She nodded gently, motioning for him to place the fabric on the table. "I will try," she said, her voice calm, yet infused with the quiet certainty of one who understood the weight of such a request. The boy smiled faintly, relief flickering in his eyes. He left the shop, glancing back, as though afraid that the magic of her presence might vanish if he didn't. Leora set to work, examining the fabric with reverent attention. It was thin, delicate, and slightly rough where it had frayed, but it carried an unmistakable warmth, a hidden glow that made her chest ache with anticipation. She understood immediately that this coat would not be a simple garment. It would be an instrument of hope, a vessel for emotion, a tapestry of love and longing stitched into every seam. For days, she worked tirelessly. She selected threads that shimmered with soft, golden hues, threads that caught the light and seemed to pulse with life. Her hands moved with practiced precision, weaving warmth, care, and gentle laughter into every stitch. She whispered quiet encouragements to herself and to the invisible currents of emotion that flowed through the fabric. She recalled moments of her own happiness, little sparks of joy that had survived even the heaviest of days, and poured them into the garment as though transferring sunlight into a jar. At night, she would fall into bed, exhausted, her fingers tingling from the effort of pouring her own vitality into another's happiness. She began to notice the toll it took on her. Her laughter felt fainter, her chest lighter, as if a small piece of her own joy had been sewn thread by thread into the coat. Yet, she continued, driven by the image of the boy's hopeful eyes, imagining the warmth that would bloom in his mother's chest when she first felt the garment drape over her shoulders. The coat slowly took shape, a masterpiece of softness and color. It was lined with memory threads spun from silver, shimmering faintly when the lamplight touched them, carrying the echoes of laughter, gentle words, and moments of simple delight. The exterior glowed faintly in shades of gold and amber, alive with a warmth that seemed to reach beyond the fabric, a silent invitation for joy to bloom in whoever wore it. Each sleeve carried the pulse of a heartbeat, each collar and hem stitched with gentle care, a quiet promise that happiness could be restored, even in small, fragile increments. When the boy returned, his eyes widened at the sight of the coat. Leora held it out to him, her hands trembling slightly as she felt the lingering weight of all the joy she had sewn into it. He clutched it against his chest, and for a brief moment, it seemed as though he could feel the pulse of her heart through the fabric. Without another word, he ran home, the coat wrapped carefully in his small arms, and disappeared from view before Leora could even offer a blessing. Hours later, the boy returned, but this time he was not alone. His mother followed behind, her steps slow and uncertain, her face pale and drawn from illness, her eyes clouded with the fatigue of days spent trapped in her own body. The boy held out the coat with trembling hands. "Here for you," he said softly, a flicker of hope shining through his worry. "Mom, please." The woman looked down at the coat, then at her son, and something unspoken passed between them. With trembling fingers, she slipped the coat over her shoulders. Immediately, a warmth radiated through her chest, spreading outward like sunlight after a long, gray winter. Her eyes widened as if she had forgotten how to feel lightness. And then a sound escaped her lips, a laugh, soft at first, then growing, bubbling over with a joy so pure that it seemed to illuminate the entire shop. Liora watched in awe, feeling the magic of the moment ripple through the room. The mother twirled slightly, the fabric catching the light, the silver threads glinting faintly as though alive. The boy laughed, too, his small arms wrapping around his mother in a tight embrace. And for a moment, the world seemed suspended, a fragile bubble of happiness and love floating above the worn wooden floorboards. And yet, as she watched, Liora felt something shift within herself. The warmth she had poured into the coat, the joy she had spun into every stitch, left a hollow ache in her chest. Her hands trembled, not from exhaustion, but from the sudden absence of the emotion she had given away. She pressed her fingers to her temples, feeling the emptiness where sunlight had once been. The laughter around her felt distant, almost unreal, and she realized, with a quiet, painful clarity, that a piece of her own spirit had remained in that coat, bound forever to the happiness of another. For a long while, she stood silently in the corner of her workshop, watching the mother and child, their joy radiating outward, lighting up the room like the soft glow of a lantern in the dark. She felt both pride and sorrow, a duality she had learned to recognize in her work. She had given life to happiness, yet the act had left her diminished, as though the very essence of joy was finite, and she had spent her own portion on another. She closed her eyes, taking slow, deliberate breaths, willing herself to remember that even as she gave, she could also endure, and that the gift of happiness, though heavy, was a gift worth carrying. Days passed, and the coat became a story whispered through the town. People spoke of the woman who had smiled again, of the magic in the stitches, and of the boy who had carried hope so fiercely that it seemed to ripple through the very air. Liora continued her work, quieter now, more mindful of the price of joy, yet undeterred. She understood that each garment she touched, each story she mended, required a careful balance of giving and preserving, a delicate dance between her own heart and the hearts of others. At night, she would sit among her spools of thread, the remnants of fabrics scattered around her like petals after a storm, and let the memory of the coat wash over her. The golden light of joy lingered faintly in the air, a warm, almost tangible hum that seemed to pulse in rhythm with her own heartbeat. She pressed her fingers to the soft cushions where she rested, feeling the subtle absence of what she had poured into the world, and yet recognizing the profound beauty in the exchange. It was not her own happiness that shone brightest, she realized, but the reflection of it in others, the way her hands could translate invisible longing into something alive and tangible. And so she continued, each stitch a careful act of devotion, each garment a conversation between hearts. The coat of joy became a quiet legend, a symbol not only of happiness restored, but of the weight and wonder of the gift she carried. Liora understood that the world would always ask of her more than she could give, that the act of weaving emotions into fabric came with a price. Yet she also knew that in the soft glow of silk and wool, in the faint shimmer of silver and gold threads, she could touch the lives of others in ways no words could reach. As night fell over Willow Street, she settled onto her cushions, the empty space around her filled with quiet reflection and the faint hum of residual joy lingering in the air. Her hands rested gently on her lap, still tingling from the work of the day. The city outside grew hushed, the cobblestones dark and slick in the pale light of the moon. And in that moment, Liora allowed herself to close her eyes, letting the fabric of her own soul rest amid the scattered threads of others. A delicate pause before the next day's gentle, demanding magic. Sleep came slowly, carrying her through corridors of gold and silver, through rooms filled with laughter, and down streets where hope glimmered faintly in the shadows. And though a part of her remained tied forever to the coat, forever entwined with the joy she had given away, she felt a quiet pride, a gentle strength growing from the knowledge that her hands could weave the invisible into something tangible, something that could heal. And so she slept, her dreams cradled in the soft light of the happiness she had stitched into the world. The unraveling the once quiet streets of Willow Street seemed to hum with anticipation, carrying whispers of Liora Wren's growing gift, or perhaps the rumor of it. People arrived at her shop, not in trickles, as they had once done, but in steady streams, their faces carrying the weight of unspoken sorrows, secret regrets, and longing that pressed on their hearts like stones. Each visitor arrived quietly, almost apologetically, with garments in their hands, scarves smelling faintly of old rain and lavender, coats frayed with years of unacknowledged grief, dresses stiff with the echoes of lost happiness. Liora welcomed them all with the same calm, gentle presence she had cultivated since inheriting the shop. But inside, she felt a slow tightening, a creeping heaviness in her chest that no amount of tea or rest could relieve. The shop, once a sanctuary filled with warm golden lamplight, soft cushions, and the comforting scent of linen and cotton, began to feel smaller. The piles of fabric grew higher each day, leaning against the shelves like silent, weighted walls. The threads shimmered faintly in the lamplight, still beautiful, still alive with possibility. Yet there was something different about them now. They seemed restless, aware of the multitude of emotions crowded into the workshop. The blue of longing pulsed faintly, like distant waves crashing against invisible shores. Gold of love flickered weakly, like candlelight struggling against a draft. Silver of memory shivered in tiny, nervous tremors, uncertain whether it belonged to her or to the myriad lives pressing into her space. At first, Liora did not notice the changes. She stitched with her usual care, letting the emotions flow through her, weaving them into the fabric and attempting to release them gently back to the world. But gradually, the threads began to resist. A hem would pull itself apart, the stitches she had carefully aligned, tearing as though agitated. A sleeve would twist under her fingers, unraveling a sequence of golden threads she had painstakingly woven. She would pause, hands trembling, and try again, only to find the threads quivering in subtle rebellion, as if the emotions themselves were refusing her guidance. The first time it happened, it was a shawl. Liora had been mending it for a woman who had lost her husband many years before. She had stitched carefully, layering warmth and small bursts of her own calm. But when she stepped back, the fabric quivered violently. The seams pulled themselves open with a soft, wrenching rip. The shawl seemed to sigh, releasing a flood of grief into the room that made her knees buckle. She caught herself on the edge of the wooden table, her breath shallow, heart hammering as tears threatened to spill. The emotions in the shawl were no longer simply transmitted through her. They were alive in their own right, pressing outward, pushing against her very presence. From that moment on, the shop itself seemed to awaken. Threads vibrated with a life of their own, occasionally leaping like silver sparks when touched, twisting and pulling even when left untouched. Fabric swirled faintly around her hands, as though caught in invisible currents. Memories pressed into the fibers like living echoes of someone else's life. A scarf might whisper in the language of a lost lover, or a coat might tremble with the anguish of a child who had never been comforted. Liora could feel them pressing against her mind, fragmenting her focus, leaving her exhausted in a way that mere sleep could not repair. The townsfolk continued to arrive, unaware of the turmoil building within the walls of her shop. They brought new layers of sorrow, a father mourning a daughter lost to the river, a young woman who had been abandoned by a love she thought eternal, a man whose laughter had faded beneath years of unspoken regret. Liora absorbed these emotions, as she always had, but now they lingered in the air, thick and stubborn, pooling in corners of the room, settling in the folds of the fabrics, as though unwilling to be released. When she tried to mend a dress, the gold of love and the silver of memory clashed violently, threads tangling and snapping in her hands. The simple act of stitching, once her meditation, became a battlefield. Even the air itself seemed heavy. It carried faint whispers, almost too soft to hear, like voices murmuring from another room, perhaps from another life. Liora caught herself glancing at empty corners, expecting to see figures that were never there. The shadows cast by the lamplight seemed to move independently, shifting as though guided by memories not her own. She would pause, breathe unevenly, and place a hand over her heart, trying to remind herself that she was still in control. But the threads continued their subtle rebellion. One morning, she found a scarf had unraveled entirely on the floor, a river of blue and silver and gold flowing across the wood, shimmering faintly with sorrow and longing. She picked it up, only to feel the weight of every story it carried pressing down on her, a weight she could not set aside. Liora began to notice changes in herself. Her hands trembled more frequently, sometimes even when she held nothing. Her chest ached constantly, a dull, gnawing emptiness that no warmth of tea or comfort of pillows could relieve. When she looked in the dusty glass of the shop window, the reflection staring back at her seemed less like herself and more like a mosaic of the emotions she had stitched and absorbed. Streaks of blue traced the contours of her arms. Flickers of gold shimmered faintly across her shoulders, and silver threads danced in her hair. It was as though the garments had left imprints on her very being, pulling pieces of her own essence into the ever-growing tide of their stories. She tried to tell herself she could endure it, that this was part of her gift. Yet the shop no longer felt like a sanctuary. The cushions where she once rested now seemed to sag under invisible weight. The lamplight flickered uncertainly, and the walls themselves seemed to hum faintly with tension. Memories not her own pressed against her mind. A child's cry from years ago, a whispered confession of love that had never been answered, a man's quiet despair as he stood in an empty house at twilight. Sometimes she would catch herself humming a tune she had never learned, or speaking words she did not consciously know. The emotions had become persistent, insistent, and no longer fully hers to control. One evening, as rain tapped softly against the windows, Liora felt the full force of the unraveling. A dress she had been mending, a vibrant piece of silk, layered with golden threads of love, began to shake violently in her hands. The seams split with a sound like a soft, sighing scream, the fabric writhing as though alive. A wave of sorrow poured out from it, drenching the shop in a haze of blue that clung to her skin and hair. She stumbled backward, catching herself against the edge of the table, trembling. The silver threads of memory tangled with the gold of joy, and she felt an unfamiliar panic rising in her chest. She realized, with a chill that pressed like stone against her heart, that the threads were no longer willing to submit to her guidance. They were awake, sentient in ways she could neither predict nor fully comprehend. From that night onward, the shop seemed to take on a life of its own. Fabrics shifted as she moved, curling and twisting as though testing her, brushing against her arms with ghostly insistence. A scarf might brush against her cheek like a whispered memory. A coat might lean toward her as if imploring for attention. Even the wooden floorboards groaned and creaked in unfamiliar patterns, echoing the pulse of the emotions contained within the shop. Liora worked with growing caution, yet the threads continued to rebel. Simple mending became an ordeal of patience, intuition, and exhaustion. Each stitch a negotiation between her will and the hidden desires of the fabrics. She began to understand the danger of her own overextension. By absorbing the sorrow, grief, longing, and joy of so many lives, she had stretched herself too thin. The magical threads no longer simply reflected emotions. They demanded space, acknowledgement, and release. When she tried to contain them too tightly, they snapped. When she tried to mend too quickly, they rebelled. It was as though the shop had become a living organism, a web of emotions too vast for one person to fully control. Liora realized that the gift she had once embraced with quiet joy was no longer entirely a gifted, was now a responsibility that threatened to consume her. Despite the turmoil, the townsfolk continued to arrive. They did not know what she endured, nor did they see the subtle chaos that had begun to inhabit the once cozy workshop. They only saw the quiet seamstress who could mend not just fabric, but hearts, and they carried their burdens to her door, trusting that she could absorb them, smooth them, and return them lighter, brighter, happier. Liora welcomed each visitor, her voice soft, her hands steady in appearance, yet inside, the threads of her own spirit frayed under the relentless weight of emotions that no longer waited quietly to be woven. They demanded, pressed, insisted. She began to dream differently as well. Nights were no longer calm and restorative. Instead, she wandered through corridors of fabric alive with the memories of countless lives. Dresses whispered secrets she had never known. Scarves hummed with the ache of unfulfilled longing. Coats trembled with the invisible weight of decades of love and regret. Sometimes she woke to find her hands clutching threads she had not touched, stitching unconsciously as if guided by some external force. The line between herself and the emotions she absorbed grew thinner with each passing day, and she began to fear that she might one morning wake to find that she no longer belonged fully to herself. The unraveling was no longer subtle. One morning, she found an entire shelf of carefully folded garments scattered across the floor, seams torn, threads shimmering faintly as if alive. A shawl she had completed only the night before hovered slightly above the ground, twisting in the air as though breathing. She reached out, hands trembling, and felt a flood of emotions that were not hers: sorrow, joy, regret, longing, all tangled together in a chaotic symphony that pressed against her chest like a living weight. The shop had become a mirror of the human heart in its most unfiltered form, and she realized she was no longer its master, only its witness. She sank to the floor among the scattered fabrics, pulling her knees to her chest as the golden lamplight flickered and hummed softly around her. The threads pulsed with a quiet insistence, vibrating faintly against her skin. She understood now that she had reached a precipice. To continue absorbing these emotions without pause was to risk losing herself entirely, to become little more than a vessel through which the sorrows, joys, and memories of others flowed unchecked. She pressed her hands to her eyes, taking shallow, careful breaths, and whispered to herself the only words that felt true. I must find a way to rest. I must find a way to protect myself, or I will unravel completely. Outside, the town continued its rhythm, unaware of the quiet chaos building within Liora's shop. But within those walls, the air pulsed with restless energy, the magical threads thrumming and twisting like living veins of color. The golden glow of joy, the blue of longing, the silver of memory, they all reached toward her, demanding, pleading, alive. Liora Wren sat in the center of it all, trembling, exhausted, yet aware of a truth she had only begun to understand. The work of mending hearts was never simple, never purely joyous. It carried a cost, one she would have to reckon with before she could continue, and in that realization, she found the first fragile flicker of clarity amid the unraveling, that even as the threads rebelled and the shop pulsed with the weight of countless sorrows, she still had the power to choose, to stitch, to pause, to protect herself. She understood, at last, that the gift she had cherished could not survive without boundaries. The threads might hum, vibrate, and rebel, but she was still Liora Wren, and the shop, no matter how alive with memories not her own, was still her home, her sanctuary, and her responsibility. As night fell, she curled among scattered fabrics, letting the residual pulse of emotions wash over her without pulling too deeply. The golden lamplight softened, the threads shimmered faintly, and she closed her eyes, trying to breathe in the knowledge that even amidst unraveling, she could begin to reclaim herself, one stitch at a time. The final stitch. The dawn was pale and fragile when Liora Wren finally sat at her work table. The shop around her unusually still. The scattered fabrics, threads, and remnants of garments from weeks of relentless mending seemed to pause in quiet anticipation. Even the air, heavy with the lingering scents of lavender, wool, and faintly metallic shimmer of silver thread, felt as though it were holding its breath. Liora's hands rested on the wooden table, worn and calloused from endless days and nights of stitching. And for the first time in weeks, she allowed herself to simply feel. She felt hollow. Each visit from the townsfolk, each garment brought with a hidden life, each thread she had coaxed and woven into order had taken a piece of her. Her laughter had grown faint, her chest light, as though a portion of her spirit had been pulled from it and stitched into the fabrics she mended. She looked at her reflection in the dusty glass pane of the shop window and barely recognized the woman who gazed back. Faint streaks of color clung to her hair and arms, subtle shimmers of blue, gold, and silver that danced when the sunlight touched them. Evidence of all the emotions she had absorbed over the months. And yet, amidst the fatigue and quiet despair, a thought had begun to crystallize in her mind. If she could create such profound beauty for others, could she not also create something for herself? Could she not, for one final act, stitch herself back into wholeness? Reclaim the pieces of her spirit that had slipped silently into the fabrics she touched each day. She had absorbed sorrow, longing, love, joy, grief, fear, hope. She had felt it all in. Now she needed to give herself the gift of being whole again. Her fingers hovered over the pile of fabrics she had gathered, carefully selecting each piece that had once been a vessel of someone else's emotion. There were threads spun with silver of memory, fabrics glowing faintly with gold of love, silks imbued with the deep, tender blue of longing, and softer, muted hues of grief. She also selected her own favorite threads, the ones she had kept for herself, quietly hidden in small drawers. A strand of deep violet for calm, a soft green for comfort, a faint pink for hope. Every color she had ever worked with now lay before her, a spectrum of lives, emotions, and moments. Liora began her task with a sense of reverent purpose. She cut, layered, and stitched with deliberate care, every movement slow, every pull of the needle considered. As she worked, the threads began to hum softly, a chorus of all the emotions she had ever absorbed. The blue of longing whispered quietly, bringing with it the ache of so many hearts she had touched. The gold of love radiated warmth, gentle and reassuring. The silver of memory shimmered faintly, glinting in the morning light. And as the cloak took shape, these emotions returned to her, not as burdens, but as reminders of the breadth and depth of the life she had lived through her work. Each stitch was a conversation between her past and present self. When she threaded the needle through a piece of golden silk, she felt the laughter of a mother restored to joy, the soft, ringing echo of happiness that had once left her chest empty. When she wove in strands of silver, memories came alive, the first blush of love, the quiet sighs of regret, the laughter of a child running through rain-soaked streets. Even the blue of longing pulsed with quiet intensity, reminding her of the hearts she had touched and the unspoken aches she had carried silently within herself. Hours passed like minutes. The morning light shifted, tilting through the windows, catching the fibers of the cloak in its fragile glow. She paused occasionally, laying a hand against the growing garment, feeling the gentle press of emotions as they circled her in quiet acknowledgement. For the first time in weeks, she did not feel drained. Instead, she felt the gradual, intoxicating return of something she had feared lost, a connection to herself. Each stitch returned a fragment of her spirit, and with every passing hour, she felt her own heartbeat growing stronger, steadier, more present. Her mind wandered as she worked. She remembered the lonely child who had asked for a coat for his sick mother, the mother's laughter that had lifted the weight from the room, and the subtle ache that had remained in her own chest afterward. She remembered the moments of grief, the quiet tears shed over fabrics saturated with sorrow, the trembling hands and aching spirit that had carried so much of the town's heart. And now, as she stitched her own cloak, all of those moments returned not as burdens, but as proof of the depth of her care, the breadth of her compassion, and the beauty of a life lived fully, if quietly, through others. The magical threads pulsed with increasing intensity, almost as if aware of the purpose behind this final creation. The cloak shimmered faintly as it grew, colors weaving together in intricate patterns, sometimes clashing, sometimes harmonizing in ways that made Leora's breath catch. The golden threads of joy danced lightly with the silver of memory, the blue of longing softened by strands of green comfort she had reserved for herself. And in the quiet, the cloak seemed to hum back to her, a living embodiment of every stitch, every moment, every feeling she had ever carried. She paused when the first hints of dawn appeared through the high windows, the pale light spilling across the floor like a gentle promise. The cloak had grown heavy in the most wonderful way, a weight she could feel settling on her shoulders even before she draped it around herself. She could feel the pulse of every color, every memory, every laugh, every tear stitched carefully into the fabric. And with a trembling hand, she made the final stitch, pressing the needle carefully through the edge of the hem, tying the knot that would complete the garment and, in a quiet, almost sacred way, complete her as well. For a moment, she held the needle in place, as though reluctant to release the final thread. Then, slowly, deliberately, she let it rest, breathing deeply, and wrapped the cloak around her shoulders. A warmth spread from her chest outward, spreading through her arms, her back, her hands. She closed her eyes and felt the cloak settle against her, heavy with the lives and emotions of so many she had helped, yet comforting, affirming, and deeply hers. Every color pulsed faintly in rhythm with her heartbeat. The golden threads of joy shimmered like sunlight across water. The silver of memory gleamed faintly, soft and serene. The blue of longing lingered gently, now tempered by the comfort she had sewn into the very fiber. And with that, Liora Wren felt herself whole again. She sank into the soft cushions she had arranged near the window, the cloak pooling around her in gentle folds. She let herself breathe fully for the first time in weeks, feeling the ebb and flow of her own emotions as they mingled with those woven into the cloak. She laughed softly, a sound both unfamiliar and exhilarating, the echo of her own joy returning at last. Tears came too, quiet, unbidden, but these were her tears, no longer borrowed from the fabrics around her, no longer fragments of lives she had carried silently. They were hers, and they felt like release, a quiet acknowledgement of the weight she had borne and the strength she had gained. Outside, the first light of dawn illuminated the shop, spilling across the floorboards and catching the edges of fabrics still waiting to be mended. The magical threads of the other garments seemed calmer now, pulsing faintly in acknowledgement, as if recognizing the return of balance in their creator. Liora allowed herself to rest fully, wrapped in the cloak, letting the pulse of its colors mingle with her own heartbeat, a quiet symphony of life, sorrow, joy, and love. She felt the fullness of her own existence return, the memories she had carried, the hearts she had touched, and the infinite small moments that had defined her work and her life. Hours passed, yet she did not move from her place. The shop was quiet, yet alive in a new way. The threads hummed softly, content, and the fabrics seemed to settle, leaning against shelves and tables with gentle weight. Liora could feel the residual warmth of joy, the calm of grief eased, the soft echoes of love lingering in the air around her. For the first time in what felt like forever, she felt safe within her own gift, knowing that she had given enough, done enough, and finally stitched herself back together. And in that quiet morning, with the cloak wrapped securely around her shoulders, Liora Wren allowed herself to simply be. The world outside awaited, full of people who would continue to bring their hearts to her, their lives woven into fabrics that would carry their emotions, hopes, and sorrows. But now, she knew she had the strength to continue, not as someone drained, hollowed by the lives she touched, but as someone complete, centered, capable of carrying both her own heart and those of others. The cloak was more than a garment. It was a testament to the life she had lived, the emotions she had carried, the souls she had touched, and the strength she had found within herself. It shimmered faintly, a living record of everything she had been and everything she could become. And as she rose from the cushions, the first rays of the sun fully spilling into the shop, she felt the quiet certainty of one who had weathered the storm of countless emotions and emerged whole. The final stitch was not just a thread through fabric, it was a stitch through her own heart, binding her past, present, and future together in a cloak that was, at last, entirely her own. Liora Wren stepped toward the window, the cloak flowing around her like a gentle river of color. The town outside was waking, the soft sounds of life pressing against the quiet sanctuary of her shop. And for the first time in many months, she felt ready to face the world, ready to continue her work, and ready to hold her own heart fully, without fear of losing it to the fabrics and emotions that had once threatened to unravel her completely. The final stitch had been made. She was whole again. The seamstress's legacy. Morning arrived quietly over Willow Street, the soft, golden light of dawn spilling across the cobblestones and filtering through the tall windows of the tailor shop. Outside, the world stirred gently, the clatter of a baker's cart, the distant laughter of children, the faint hum of life resuming its usual rhythm. But inside the shop, a profound silence lingered. settling over the worn wooden floorboards and the shelves stacked high with fabrics, threads, and the faint, lingering scent of lavender, cotton, and something indefinably magical. The shop was empty. No rhythmic clatter of scissors, no soft pull of thread through fabric, no quiet muttering of a seamstress conversing with her work. Liora Wren was gone, yet the space retained the echo of her presence, a delicate hum that resonated faintly in the light, the chairs and the wooden counters. Dust motes floated lazily through the sunbeams, catching faint glimmers of color here and there, as though tiny remnants of the magic that had once filled the air still lingered. At the center of the shop stood a mannequin, tall and graceful, draped in the cloak Liora had woven for herself. The garment shimmered softly, radiating all the colors she had ever stitched: golden threads of joy, blue of longing, silver of memory, and the subtle hues of hope, calm, and love she had kept for herself. The cloak seemed alive, pulsing gently with the echo of emotions, as if the very soul of its creator had been woven into its fabric. The threads glimmered faintly in the morning light, casting soft, dancing reflections across the wooden floor and the walls. For a moment, it seemed as though Liora herself might step from behind it, her hands poised with a needle, ready to continue her work. But the quiet persisted. Years had passed, or perhaps only hours, for in the world of memories and magic, time often bent and stretched in ways difficult to measure. The shop had become a sanctuary in stillness, a place where the lingering energy of countless emotions could rest. After having traveled through the hands of a single seamstress, the magical threads, once restless, no longer twisted or quivered. They had settled into a delicate, eternal rhythm, a quiet testament to the care and life that had passed through them. The box that had once held threads capable of weaving emotions still rested in its familiar place on a high shelf, its surface dulled slightly by time, yet retaining the soft, persistent shimmer that marked it as extraordinary. Within it, spools of thread glimmered faintly, colored with every emotion Liora had ever used. Some threads were pale, almost ethereal, as if whispering secrets of longing and memory. Others glowed warmly, radiating love, hope, or laughter that had once danced in her shop. And tucked neatly atop the threads was a small note, written in soft silver ink, delicate and precise. A message left for whoever might find it. Every heart can be mended, but never without feeling it first. Time moved slowly in the shop, and the world outside shifted with gentle insistence. Seasons passed. The streets of Willow Street aged gracefully, the cobblestones worn smooth in some places, dusted with fallen leaves in others. The sunlight, once golden and vibrant, now carried a softer, more settled hue. Yet the shop remained untouched by neglect, as though protected by the memory and magic that had always lived within it. One morning, many years later, a young apprentice entered the shop. She was curious, shy, and observant, the kind of child who carried the weight of wonder in her eyes. She had heard whispers of the tailor shop that once belonged to the mysterious Liora Wren, the seamstress, who could mend not only fabric but hearts. Tales of magical threads, garments that glimmered with unseen emotion, and a cloak that carried the soul of its maker had reached her ears. Long before she dared to cross the threshold, the girl stepped cautiously inside, the wooden floor creaking softly beneath her feet. Dust motes danced in the sunlight, streaming through the windows, and she paused to take in the quiet majesty of the shop. The shelves were orderly despite years of stillness, and the air smelled faintly of lavender and old cloth. But what caught her attention first was the mannequin. The cloak, still draped over it, seemed almost alive in the morning light. Threads shimmering with colors the girl could not name but felt in the core of her chest. It pulsed gently, a heartbeat in fabric, a presence that invited both awe and reverence. Her eyes fell to the box on the high shelf. Something about it seemed to call to her, a quiet insistence. She reached for it, the soft, silver note brushing against her fingers as she lifted it from the shelf. Carefully, reverently, she opened the box, revealing the threads within. The colors glimmered faintly in the sunlight, alive and vibrant despite the years. She held a spool gently in her hands, feeling a subtle warmth radiate from it, a faint pulse that matched the rhythm of her own heartbeat. The note was still legible, its words carrying the weight of decades. Every heart can be mended, but never without feeling it first. She read it aloud softly, and as she did, the air in the shop seemed to respond. The threads shimmered with renewed energy, as if acknowledging the wisdom passed down to her. The cloak on the mannequin seemed to lean slightly forward, the colors rippling faintly like a quiet wave of encouragement. The girl felt a rush of understanding, a connection not only to the seamstress who had created the magic, but to every life touched by her work. She realized that the gift she had found was not merely in the threads themselves, nor even in the garments Liora had woven. The true magic was in the act of feeling, truly understanding the weight of sorrow, the warmth of love, the gentle ache of longing before one could mend it with trembling fingers. The apprentice lifted a spool of golden thread, the shimmer of light catching her eyes and filling her chest with an unfamiliar warmth. She imagined a garment she might one day create, not just to mend fabric, but to touch hearts. Every stitch she planned to make would carry intention, empathy, and care. Every knot she tied would be a promise to honor the emotions that had once flowed so freely through the hands of the seamstress who had come before her. She spent hours in the shop that day, exploring the fabrics, examining the threads, and running her fingers gently over the cloak that had belonged to Liora. Each color seemed to vibrate softly beneath her touch, and with each breath she felt a connection, forming a quiet bond between apprentice and master, between past and future, between heart and craft. She realized that Liora's work had been more than a gift to her town. It had been a legacy, a lesson for anyone willing to truly see and feel the invisible currents of emotion that flow through life outside. The streets of Willow Street continued their quiet rhythm. Life went on as it always did, carrying new joys, new sorrows, and new stories yet to be woven. But within the shop, a different sort of time existed, a suspended moment of reverence, a space where the magic of emotions could rest, mingle, and prepare for the hands that would one day learn to guide them once more. The apprentice felt this keenly, and she understood instinctively that she had been chosen not merely by chance, but by the invisible currents of the heart itself. She set up her own workspace, arranging spools of thread by color, fabric by type, just as Liora had done. The shop felt alive, not with chaos as it once had, but with quiet expectation. Every garment, every strand of thread, every shimmer of color seemed to whisper encouragement, telling her that the work she would do mattered, not only to the people who would come seeking her aid, but to the very soul of the shop, to the magic that lingered in every corner. And as she began to stitch her first garment, tentatively at first, she felt a subtle hum in her chest, a faint echo of the heartbeat she imagined had once belonged to Liora herself. The threads pulsed gently beneath her fingers, not demanding, not resisting, but offering themselves willingly, carrying the soft legacy of decades of care, of lives touched, of hearts mended. The note's message remained clear and resonant in her mind. Every heart can be mended, but only by someone willing to feel it fully first. The apprentice worked slowly, carefully, aware that each stitch was more than a loop of threaded, was a bond, a promise, a channel for the unseen, delicate energies that could flow through fabric into a person's soul. She imagined the joy she might restore, the grief she might ease, the love she might amplify, and as she worked, she felt herself becoming part of the continuum, the living thread connecting past, present, and future. Through the hours, the day wore on, and sunlight shifted across the room, catching the cloak in a soft glow that seemed to pulse with subtle colors in harmony with the apprentice's own heartbeat. She paused often, feeling, reflecting, understanding that the work of mending was not merely technical but profoundly personal. Every emotion stitched into the fabrics would leave an imprint, a trace of someone's heart, and she would need to carry it carefully, honor it, and let it flow naturally through her craft. Even as evening fell and shadows stretched across the wooden floorboards, the shop remained alive in its quiet, magical way. The cloak, draped over the mannequin, continued to shimmer softly, the colors intertwined in a perfect harmony of all the emotions Liora had ever held. The apprentice felt a deep, almost sacred respect for the garment, recognizing it not merely as a piece of clothing, but as a living testament, a repository of a life devoted to understanding, empathy, and love. Years would pass. The apprentice would become a master in her own right, guiding new hands, teaching new hearts to feel, and creating garments that carried not only warmth, protection, or beauty, but the subtle magic of truly mending the invisible threads of human emotion. The shop would remain a sanctuary, a place where the past whispered to the future, and where every stitch carried both a memory and a promise. And throughout it all, the cloak would remain draped over the mannequin in the quiet, eternal glow of Liora's legacy. Its threads pulsed softly with the emotions of countless lives, a gentle heartbeat in fabric that would continue to inspire and teach anyone who entered the shop, anyone willing to learn that to truly mend a heart, one must first allow themselves to feel it fully, deeply, and with unflinching care. Liora Wren was gone, but her magic endured, her shop, her threads, and the cloak carried forward her essence, the quiet, enduring truth she had woven into every stitch, that every heart can be mended, but only by someone willing to meet it with their own, entirely open, wholly felt heart. The apprentice felt this truth with every breath, every stitch, and every pulse of color beneath her fingers. And in the gentle hush of the morning light, the shop stood as it always had, timeless and radiant, alive with magic, memory, and love, the legacy of the seamstress who had once sewn not only garments, but the invisible fabric of countless hearts, leaving behind a gift that would endure for generations yet to come. Years later, a young apprentice discovered the glowing threads and a small note, written in silver ink. Every heart can be mended, but never without feeling it first. And so, the magic of Liora Wren's gentle hands lives on in every stitch, in every whisper of fabric, waiting, always, for someone willing to listen. Good night, dear listener. Let the threads of your own dreams carry you softly into sleep.